Again, our scripture will be coming from 1 Samuel 10, chapter 10, verse 1. Then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed him and said, is it not because the Lord has anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? And if you would allow me to use for a subject message on today, I would like to use switching cups. Switching cups. And Saul is most noted for becoming so jealous of David that he became obsessed with killing him. That's what most people remember Saul for, is that he was so jealous of David that he became obsessed with killing him. Wherever David was, he sent people to spy out where David was, because in his mind, all that mattered was killing David. And if he could kill David, he felt like he would be successful in his kingship. He didn't like how the people compared his numbers to David's numbers. They would say, well, Saul killed 1,000, David killed 10,000. And so therefore that only infuriated him more. Everything about David began to irritate Saul. But a lot of us, that's what we know Saul for, is how much he hated David. But I just want to show you another side of Saul, because Saul did not start out that way. 1 Samuel 9 tells us that Saul was so shocked when he got the word of the Lord that God had chose him to reign over his people, to be king over his people, that Saul was just shocked. He could not even believe it. Saul even asked Samuel, he said, why are you even saying these kinds of things to me? My family is the smallest and the least out of the tribe. My family is considered the least out of all the tribes. So out of all the tribes, you mean to tell me that the least is the one that God is going to use? God is going to use somebody from the least family. Have you ever been that way, where God has done something for you and you was just in awe, and you was just so humbled by the fact that God has done something like that in that magnitude concerning you, that it left you in awe? That's how Saul was. He started out, and he could not even believe that God had chose him. And even when it was time for him to be presented to the people as king, Saul went and hid himself because he was feeling inadequate and that the job was too big for him. He was in such shock that he went and hid himself. And most of us, how many people remember that about Saul? How many people even know that about Saul? And most of us don't, because that is not what Saul is remembered for. People will struggle to remember your victories of your humble start when it is drowned out by consistent, overshadowing, arrogant, and self-centered choices. Ooh, Pastor Fran gonna say that again. People will struggle to remember the victories of your humble start when it is drowned out by consistent, overshadowing, arrogant, self-centered choices. Saul's dislike of David was not because of anything that David did, but Saul's dislike of David, it was centered because of his own failures. It was centered and it was rooted in his own failures. Saul's failures and insecurities was not even because he lacked opportunity. Saul lacked something that was much greater, that contributed to his internal struggles that displayed themselves publicly. I hope somebody caught what Pastor Fran just said. Sometimes the things that you won't deal with internally, the things that you won't take to God, the things that you won't acknowledge to God, they have a way of showing themselves in places that you never wanted anybody else to see. They have a place of showing, that they have a place and a time that they will show themselves, that will oftentimes leave you humiliated, embarrassed, and disappointed. But the thing that Saul lacked the flexibility to switch. You might be like, Pastor Fran, what are you talking about? He lacked the flexibility to switch. He lacked the flexibility to come out in the strength of God before the people and go back unto God as one of those people that needed to be strengthened by God. Woo. I'm going to say that again for those who are taking notes. Saul lacked the ability to come out because as king, he had to come out. And nobody wants to see a king that comes out all feeble and weak looking as if he can easily be taken advantage of, because sometimes people will judge you by how you look and think that you're not who you really are. And so sometimes this is why we fall subject to having to put on the strong face all the time, because we're trying to live up to a look that we want people to perceive about us, because we feel like if we look strong and if we got all of these muscles and if we got our shoulders squared up and our head is up high, that gives people the impression that there is nothing wrong in my life. And sometimes we get caught up in trying to present that image to people, and then we fail to make the switch. And Saul is having to come out before the people, and he knows what he knows, that he needs to have a certain look. He needs to have a certain, stature about him. But then yet Saul did not realize, and he was not able to make the switch when it was time to go back in and be strengthened. I'm going to say that again. He lacked the ability to come out in the strength of God before the people and go back in unto God as one of those people who needed to be strengthened by God. Whatever you do in life, don't forget that it is God who is strengthening you. Don't forget that you got to make the strength. I know who you are in the boardroom. I know who you are as the supervisor. I know who you are as the pastor. I know who you are as the intercessor. I know who you are as the prophet. But don't forget when it's time to go back into God, you're none of that. Come on, did somebody catch that? I know what it's like to be the one that does all of this, but then there's a time that I have to put all of that aside and say, God, I'm just here. And Saul couldn't make the switch. That is one of the greatest strengths that you could have, is when you're able to make the switch. But the thing that I want to point out about being able to make the switch, that anytime that you make a switch, it's intentional. Come on here. When you make a switch, it's intentional. And the only thing that I can think of is making a switch is when I'm fixing plates in my house. And if I put a lot of broccoli on somebody's plate in my house, there can be the same amount of meat, there can be the same amount of rice or macaroni and cheese. But the moment that I put too much broccoli on on somebody's plate, I put too much broccoli. If I put too many florets on that one plate, I would not be surprised if his plate ends up in his daddy's spot and his daddy's plate ends up in his spot, because he's always looking for the plate that has the least amount of broccoli on it. And so therefore he'll make the switch, because he does not, watch this, he does not want to be accountable for all the broccoli that's on his plate. We don't have no dog, so he cannot slide any up under the table and, or he cannot cough and, pull some out and put it up under the table. We don't have a dog, so he can't do that. And it's safer for him to eat the broccoli with these food prices than to try to go to the trash can with it. So therefore, what he'll do is he will make the switch. He's intentional about making the switch. So he's not responsible for the broccoli that is on his plate. So again, switching is intentional. It's something that you are cognitively aware of. You are conscious of what you are giving. So you see one thing, when you switch something, the thing that you are switching out, you deem it to be more valuable than what you have. Oh my God, did somebody just catch that? Anytime you make a switch, you are intentional. And the things that you are switching out, you deem it to be more profitable. You deem it to be more valuable than what you are releasing and letting go, than what you're switching it out for. And that is the one thing that Saul struggled with. He struggled with making the switch, because if I could show it to you any kind of way, I want you to see this. And this is Saul. This is how Saul had to come out before the people. Saul was full, and Saul looked like he had it together. He looked like his relationship with God was just everything that he needed to be in. Plus, my God, there must be something special about me, because God is anointed me to be king over his people. And I can imagine how Saul was feeling, and just the confidence that Saul had, knowing that God had called him. And oh my, but now I got to come out before the people, and he knows that this is how he should look when he comes out before the people. So he did not have a problem presenting himself this way. The problem was that Saul had is that when it was time, because how many of us know we can have that time where God uses us and it makes us feel confident, but how many of us know sometimes we can start dealing with the issues of life? And I want y'all to notice what's about to happen. We can start dealing with the issues of life. Is anybody seeing the change now? Is anybody seeing the change now? Are you seeing what's happening when we're dealing with the issues of life? If it's not the finances, it's the children. If it's not the children, it's the marriage. If it's not the marriage, it's the job. And if it's not the job, it's something. It's the news. It's the economy. It's always something trying to, watch this, it's always trying to soak up what I have. Can anybody relate to that? I go in and I get filled up, and I get the word, and I go to church, and I come to life support. I even go to corporate prayer. But as soon as I come out, I have to deal with all of these things that I'm dealing with. And it's like it's soaking up everything that I got from God. But I'm still trying to make it look like, I'm still trying to make it look like I'm strong. I'm still trying to make it look like I'm full. And I want y'all to stay with me and keep watching this, because I want you to watch what happens. Watch this. After all of those things, can anybody see the difference in what the cup looks like now? The cup looks different. If you can see the cup difference, can somebody just give Pastor Fran a virtual hand wave to let me know that you're seeing it? But Saul is in the mindset and in the frame of mind that he feels like he still has to come out full. Now you've taken the people into battle and you've won battles, and your cup don't look like it once did, but you're still there because you want the people to see you. You want the people to think well of you. So you keep coming out, and these things keep happening, and life just keeps happening, and life just keeps happening. And it's one thing happening after another. And Saul was not conscious enough to understand that everything that he went through, it was not for him to project himself to the people as being full, more so than it was for him to present himself to God as being empty. Ooh, oh my God, did you catch that? Because sometimes we are so spent and we're so focused on presenting ourselves to be strong before the people that we cannot make the switch. We do not switch our cups when we are in different places. We're trying to present a cup full all the time because we want people to think, watch this, a certain way of us. Ooh. Oh my God. We want people to have this idea about us. We want them to have this fascination about us and who we are. But when you are God-centered, you don't care what they think you are, because you are more focused on, watch this, I don't have a problem sometimes presenting myself to you as empty, because the more that I can present myself to you as empty, the more I can make room for God to do this. Oh my God, are you seeing that? But most of us struggle at making the switch because, watch this, we feel like because we're this way with this group of people or in front of people that I have to go to God the same way. The things that God wants you to show people is not the things that he wants you to necessarily show him. Because sometimes we can show people one thing and be a whole different person with God. Woo. And that's where some of us struggle at, is because we don't understand that we can be who we really are with God. We can be that broken vessel that needs the strength of an almighty God to take us through. And sometimes we find ourselves going to God. Watch this. Sometimes we find ourselves going to God like this. Oh God. I want God to see me like this because that's really how I want people to see me. Mm. But when you are really, and you really have the heart of God and you don't mind making the switch, because watch this, Saul struggled with making the switch because he was more intoxicated with people seeing him than he was with people seeing God. And anytime you are more engrossed with people seeing you and seeing how strong you are and seeing how strong your relationship is, or presenting them with the idea of how strong your relationship is with God, you will miss, and you will miss God altogether. And all you're going to be doing is actually trying to project an image of God, but never operating in the power of God. Mm. I want somebody to catch that. If you are more consumed with presenting an image of God, you will lose the ability to operate in the power of God. Because it's about your image and how you want people to feel about your relationship with God. You want people to think that God has just, singled you out to do something so great. And sometimes he does. But that is never the place or the excuse for us to substitute needing God. Sometimes I have to switch my cup. This is what pastor looks like when she's standing up here in front of you. She looks this way. Oh my God. I don't have any reserve. I don't have any type of embarrassment. I don't have any type of reluctancy to tell you that there are days I am sitting on my back porch and I look just like this to God. If this cup could cry, that would be a perfect example of me. If this cup had a brain, matter of fact, I'm glad the cup doesn't have a brain, because sometimes when I go in the presence of God, that's just like me. God, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do. I'm switching my cups now. I know when I get out in front of the people, I look like I've been praying all week. I look like I've been just like in your presence all week. And I look like I've just been running on full all week long. But most of the time when you see me and I'm looking like I'm on full, it's only because I have went before God as an empty vessel, waiting for him, needing him to pour into me. Is that anybody else on the day? I know in front of people I look one way, but let me tell you something. I'm not reserved. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed to tell you that I need God. I need him to pour into me. I need him to fill me up, because I don't know half of the stuff that I thought I knew. And trying to keep up this image so people can think well of me, God, that's tiresome. It's exhausting. And it's putting me in positions that I'm having to watch this, endure public embarrassment, wondering if they're talking about me, wondering what they're saying about me, wondering what they're thinking about me, all because I failed to make the switch. And Saul's inability to make the switch, it made him envious of people who God had put in place to help him. Mm. Because he couldn't make the switch. He cared more about his image than he did God's image. He wanted the people to think well of him. I want them to think that there's so many blessings over here. I want them to think that my relationship with God is so exclusive that he's only done this for me. And that is not why God blesses us. That is not why God pours into us. That is not why God does the things that he does for us. God does the things that he does for us because he loves us and that he can trust us to be the people that are going to reflect his image in the earth. I don't have a problem telling people that I struggle sometimes. I don't have a problem telling people I don't know all the answers sometimes. I'm not the person that has to have all the answers all the time. I just want to be that person that God can pour into at any time. Oh God. But when I'm so spent on presenting my cup as always being full, like I said, we got to know when to make the switch. Because the person that I am here is not the person that I am up there. I'm the person that needs God. I'm the person that cannot do it without God. I know I got the job. I know I got the house. I know I got the car. I know what my bank account says, but I need God. I don't mind switching my cup because remember what we said, switching your cup is intentional. Whew. I know what my credit score is, but I can still switch my cup. I know what my check stub says, but I can still switch the cup. Do I have anybody that says, I know what my situation is, but I can still switch the cup? I don't have a problem switching the cup. When my situation is good, I can switch the cup. When my situation is not looking as good as it was yesterday, I can switch my cup. And switching my cup is intentional because I understand that regardless of what state I'm in, I need God. Whether I have a lot or whether I have a little, I will never, in the best of my ability, in my right frame of mind, switch my position of needing God. I remember when our oldest son first got drafted to play for the Broncos, and we actually moved to Denver. And I'll never forget when my sister had called me. And my sister was telling somebody, I taught Bible study before. I used to have a beauty salon, and on every Monday night, we would have Bible study. This was before anything ever transpired or took place in our life. I taught a Bible study every Monday night. Then after that, I taught for a dear friend of mine at a service that he had called Crossroads. And I would teach at that service faithfully every Sunday. You remember that, Antonio? We would get up every Sunday morning and we would go to Crossroads. And I think Crossroads started at 8 o'clock. And I'm dragging Antonio up and he's sitting on the front row with his coloring books that my friend's wife had brought him. And, he's sitting there and, I did all of that pre relocation. I did all of that. And then my sister had called me. We were maybe 2 years in the NFL at that time. And my sister had called me and she was telling somebody that I was doing something as far as with teaching or preaching or something. I don't remember what she was telling them, but I do remember specifically that my sister, they asked my sister, they said, she's still doing church stuff? Ty, you remember that? And my sister had called me, and she was telling me what they had said. They was like, they was really shocked that though we had relocated and our situation had drastically changed, that I was still doing God. It was almost like they thought that because of what God had done in our lives, that that was supposed to be the end of it. I was just always now just supposed to operate as if I was full. But I thank God that I had enough sense, I had enough knowledge, I had enough wisdom, I had a deep commitment to the things of God to understand that regardless of what had happened in our financial situation, what had happened in our life, the changes that God had done, I still saw myself as this. Come on here. Can anybody relate to that? I saw myself as that. And it was baffling to me that they thought that it was almost like, oh, she just supposed to serve God until she get what she want and then she can quit. No. In my mind, there was nothing else to switch for. That was only enough. In my mind, it was not my reason to quit. In my mind, that was my reason to stay committed. Come on here. Oh my God. Some of the things that God does in our life, it's not to make us quit. It's to make us, watch this, it's to encourage us to stay committed, knowing that He is faithful and He is true. So on Sundays at the game and during the week when we're working out business details and doing, all this other stuff, I might have looked like this, but what people didn't know that I spent so many days in my closet. I spent so many days laying in my closet still seeking God because that wasn't it for me. That wasn't enough for me because the stuff wasn't it. I needed more of God. And I thank God that I had enough of His word in me to know how to make the switch. And even on today, my son no longer plays. He had a run with the Broncos. Then he went to the Indianapolis Colts. And he no longer plays. But it's one thing that they can say and be telling the absolute truth about it. No matter what had happened and transpired in our lives, I stood 10 toes committed to the things of God. When we had a lot, when we had more than enough, we stayed committed. Matter of fact, if we even go back before this, when we didn't even have enough, I was committed. Come on. When we got enough, I was committed. When we got more than enough, I was committed. Because I was not serving God for myself. I was not serving God for stuff. I was serving God because I was committed. And Saul couldn't make the switch. When God began to use him to do things that caused people to see him in a different light, he could not make the switch. And I loved how Mr. Roy said it. He said Saul would rather fight than to switch. Woo! Oh my God. That's why he was constantly seeking David's life, because he would rather fight than make the switch. And sometimes we don't even understand in life, we would rather fight to keep up an image, to keep up a facade, to keep people thinking what they think about us, than to make the switch and be dependent upon God. And sometimes in my closing, that's all God is waiting for. God is waiting for you to come to Him and say, God, I can't do this. I can't do this by myself. And trying to keep up this image as if everything is okay, it only leaves me spiraling further down. It only leaves me more depressed. It leaves me eating more. It leaves me cursing more. It leaves me doing things more that I wouldn't have to do if I would just make the switch. If I would just make the switch. Because before you can make the switch publicly, you got to make the switch privately. Even when Saul had the opportunity to repent, he wouldn't even do that. He knew he was wrong. And he tried to keep up this image, not only to the people, but also in the presence of God. In my closing, I want to encourage the body of Christ. As a people of God, you got to know when to make the switch. Do you want them to see you? Or do you want them to see the power of God working through you? Because sometimes we want the clothes, we want the car, we want the house, we want those things because we want them to see us. As if that is a synopsis of how much God loves me. But I try to live my life. And if Saul would have lived his life trying to tell people and trying to example to people that the life that I'm living, the victories that I'm winning, it's not just exclusively for me. Oh my God. Because if you make the choices, if you honor God, if you serve God, those same things will be available to you. It's not exclusively. It's choice-based. Oh God. Because God has no respect to person. What he does for one, he'll do for the other. Saul's jealousy of David was not because David did anything wrong towards him. It was based out of the fact of what David did right before God, even with his mistakes. David knew how to get back in the right place with God. David knew how to make the switch. David knew how to come out as king, but go back as a servant. Oh my God. David knew how to come out as the strong man, but then go back in the presence of God as a man that needed to be strengthened by God. Do you know how to make the switch? Yeah, I know you daddy over here, and you husband over here, and you provider over here, and you're all of these things over here in the boardroom, in the meeting, in the office. I'm not impressed with who you are there. But your real power, your real strength is defined. Is when you get into places where can't nobody see you. And you choose not to fight. You don't choose what you want God to see. You choose the empty cup so you can be who he's called you to be. And sometimes that's where we struggle. We want God to see us like this. And God said, I'd rather see you like this. Because if I can see you like this, I can see you as the person that will let me make you, that will let me mold you, that will let me pour into you. So that when people do see you, they will see me. They will see me. Whose image do you really want them to see? Do you really want them to see him? Or do you really want them to see you? Can you make the switch?